The Dolphins need to win out, and they start this week against the Houston Texans, and they may be in big trouble in this matchup against Houston. Game is at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Dolphins are 3-point underdogs. Total is 47.5, and I believe there is one reason why the Dolphins may struggle in this matchup. But before we get into that, do you want the Dolphins to get the win and improve to 7-7 and get back to 500? If you do, like the video, hit that like button. Let's get 450 likes to get the good mojo flowing for this game against the Texans on Sunday. So what is causing the big trouble for the Miami Dolphins? Well, it's the fact that Terron Armstead isn't playing. And we are filming this a little bit earlier in the week, so maybe it's been announced officially, maybe it hasn't. But it sounds like he will not be playing against the Texans on Sunday due to that knee injury. He's not going to go on IR, but he just needs some time to let it heal and take time off from football activities. And when you look at the depth chart, that's where things are going to have to start to shuffle, because Kendall Lamb is already filling in at right tackle for Austin Jackson, who's on IR for the rest of the season. And with that being the case, that means Patrick Paul is going to have to fill in at left tackle. Top 55 pick in the NFL draft back in April. The rookie out of Houston, second rounder, has a lot of potential, and he's going to have to play in this game against the Texans, which is concerning due to the fact, well, who does Houston have at the two edge positions? But first, let's look at Patrick Paul, because he actually has played 2 full games this season. He played in Week 4 against Tennessee when starting and filling in for Terron Armstead. That was the one game that he missed earlier this season before the game actually started. And then he basically started Week 14 against the Jets. And this is how things fared. 54, 52 overall grade. He's clearly better as a pass blocker than a run blocker. Allowed 3 and 2 pressures respectively, 1 sack against the Tennessee Titans. And when you really think about the 2 performances from Paul, I can't confidently go back and say that he was a major issue, especially in the passing game. I know you saw the sack and the pressure allowed, but like when I visually remember what went wrong against the Titans, what went wrong offensively against the Jets, I'm not going to point and say Patrick Paul was the reason why this offensive line struggled and the offense struggled. But he does need to be better in the run game. And I think, frankly, everyone does need to be better in the run game. The Dolphins are averaging 59 rushing yards per game over the last 5. That is worse than football. They have yet to have a game with 100 yards rushing over the last 5 weeks. It's been all on the passing game, which has been a little bit frustrating, and why, to me, this Dolphins offense is struggling at putting the ball in the end zone rather than having to settle for field goals when they get inside the 20. But here's the thing about this game against the Texans on Sunday. The Dolphins simply just will not win if Patrick Paul plays bad against the Texans. They will not win. And the numbers that you saw against the Titans and Jets, and based off what I can remember and what I've watched on tape, like if that happens again on Sunday, that will be fine. But if he plays worse than what the numbers we just showed and has his worst game of his career, which probably wouldn't be the most shocking thing considering he's only played 3 full games, you're going to have issues moving the football against the Texans front 7 that is very good and very, very physical. But let me know, do you have faith in the second round pick back in April, Patrick Paul? Type Y if you do, type N if you do not. The reason why I am concerned as well, it's because look at who he will have to go up against. The Texans made a pretty big investment into their defensive line. They had Jonathan Grenard leaving for agency. They replaced him with Danielle Hunter on a massive 2-year contract. And remember, just 2 years ago, they traded up to get Will Anderson Jr. in the draft, and he has been Rookie of the Year defensively, and he looks like one of the best young pass rushers in all football. These two have combined for 20 sacks, 28 TFLs. They are good in the run game as well. These two are unbelievable. And having to play what I would argue is the second best defensive edge duo in the NFL with 2 backup offensive tackles and Kendall Lamb and Patrick Paul is probably the least ideal thing that you can possibly think of. Like, I hope Armstead's good. He's been the second best offensive tackle in football according to Pro Football Focus this year. He's only allowed 1 sack. He's been only flagged for 1 penalty all year too. Like, Armstead's been so good. And the fact that you aren't going to be able to have him basically stonewall one of Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson Jr. in this matchup is devastating. And if the Dolphins want to get the upset on the road, Paul and Lamb are going to have to put their big boy pants on and play the game of their lives. And we'll have more to discuss here in just a second. But we are sponsored by Game Time, the best ticketing app out there. And if you want to go see the final home Dolphins game, which isn't this week against Houston, but the week after against San Francisco, make sure you get your tickets with Game Time. But if you want to go to any live event in your local area, whether it's a sporting event, comedy show, concert, get Game Time and use them to purchase your tickets. They have the lowest price guaranteed. What does that mean? Well, when you find a ticket potentially that is a lower price on a different service in the same seat, same section, same row, Game Time will actually credit you 110% of the difference. That's how guaranteed their lowest price is. You also get a panoramic view in the app of your seat before you buy. They just make purchasing tickets comfortable, and you never have to worry about a thing. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS when signing up to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, first purchase only. But one more time, download the app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS to get $20 off your first purchase. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. What time is it? It is game time. All right, if you watched all of our content this week, you would have seen our video that we put out on Monday, initially breaking down the Terron Armstead news and what this means for the Dolphins. And we're going to talk about it again here on today's show. The quick game in the passing game will be very important for this Miami Dolphins offense, but it's something that the Dolphins have to rely on quite a bit regardless. And when you think of quarterbacks in the National Football League that get the ball out the quickest, Tua is in that discussion, and the numbers reflect that. Average time to throw this season amongst qualified starters, Tua Tagovailoa is fourth in terms of getting the ball out of his hands, 3.18 seconds. Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, and Kirk Cousins are the only quarterbacks ahead of him. But to me, the reason why these three are ahead of him is because offensive line stinks. Offensive line stinks. Offensive line stinks. These two are more scheme-related, and you can say the offensive line stinks for Tua, but actually the passing numbers and pass blocking numbers would not reflect that. But they script the ball to get out of his hands quicker than anyone in the National Football League. And some may say it's because of all the screens that Mike McDaniel calls and runs. And you could say Tua might be a screen merchant because this season he is fifth in the National Football League in total dropbacks that are screens, which is crazy to think about because this is not the Dolphins offense. This is just Tua Tagovailoa. And remember, he missed 4 games. So if he did not miss 4 games, I think he would clearly be the number 1 quarterback in total dropbacks that were screens. And that is reflected in the dropback percentage being 18.3%, which is first in the National Football League by quite a wide margin. I believe the next highest dropback percentage of screens is 15% by Jordan Love. And I believe Jared Goff was in the top 5, Baker Mayfield as well. And when you even look more into it, Tua has been phenomenal this year. He's thrown a lot of touchdowns. 6 of them actually come on screen passes. So when you think about the way the Dolphins have ran their offense this season, they have predicated themselves. Instead of taking the deep shots to Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, everyone asks me, why aren't the Dolphins getting those explosive pass plays like they did last year and the year prior? It's because this scheme and philosophy may have changed to get the ball out of Tua's hands quicker, protect him more, and utilize their playmakers more in the quick screen game more than they did prior. And maybe they just say do that because they don't have as much faith in the offensive line holding up in the time required to hit those deep shots. But the numbers are there. Clearly, they run more screens than anyone else with Tua at quarterback, and it's the reason why that Tua gets the ball out of his hands so quickly. But when you talk about the quick game, I think you also have to talk about the tight end, because the tight end is a quarterback's best friend in terms of getting the ball out of his hands quickly over the middle of the field within 5-7 yards of the line of scrimmage when he's feeling pressured. Drop it down to the tight end. But Jonnu Smith is so good in the yak game that you can run pop passes to him, end arounds, screens. And you saw against the Jets in overtime, Jonnu Smith didn't have a catch in regulation. But in overtime, he had 3 catches, 44 yards, and the game-winning 10-yard touchdown. But 2 of those catches went for 34 yards, and both of those were screens. And over the last 4 games, Jonnu Smith has 28 receptions, 345 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I would expect Jonnu Smith to be another focal point of this Dolphins offense, especially with the inability to probably protect Tua for a deep amount of time in the pocket, going up against Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Expect the quick game. Expect Jonnu Smith to be heavily involved which may actually be a good thing for the Miami Dolphins. But before we do that, I do want to show Jonnu some love because he was absolutely stonewalled, and then out of nowhere, 3 catches, 44 yards, and the game-winning 10-yard grab to beat the Jets and end their season. So Jonnu Smith some love by spamming his jersey number down in the comment section. Drop those 9s. The reason why I think Jonnu Smith is going to be even more involved than he has been potentially over the last 4 weeks, where he's got over the 100-yard mark twice and has 4 touchdowns in 4 games, is because the Houston Texans defense could be one of their weaknesses. And for the entire season, it has been a strong point, but it's kind of having a little chink in the armor for the Texans defense. Over the last 4 weeks, Houston has allowed 20 receptions, 234 yards, and 1 touchdown against tight ends. You saw Chigakonkwo go off against the Texans from Tennessee. You saw Evan Ingram in Jacksonville have a good game against the Texans defense. So I think Jonnu Smith can have a good game against Houston. But when you also factor in the fact that they will be without their top linebacker, Azeez Al-Shaair, because of his suspension, and they might have to rely on Christian Harris for the first time this season, who has not played a game this year. So first game action of the season, going up against Jonnu Smith. I'm excited to see what happens for this Dolphins offense, who is going to have to change the way they think with potentially Armstead being out, going up against this tough defensive front, but also the way they attack these safeties, these linebackers over the middle of the field, because talking with Texans Today host Jeremy Chuggs here at Chat Sports, his main concern is the quick passing game, because he thinks they can hold up in coverage long enough for to get pressure. But he even is scared of the speed, the athleticism, and the ability to get out in open space with Waddle, Achane, Jonnu, Tyreek, and that's the thing he's most concerned about. So I'm excited to see the chess match between Mike McDaniel, D'Amico Ryans, and company in this heavily anticipated game, which has a lot of implications. Texans couldn't clinch a playoff spot this week. Miami needs to win out to have a chance to make the playoffs. It's going to be a fun atmosphere in Houston, and we'll be live for that game on Sunday. So make sure you hit that sub button. Join us for our Week 15 watch party. We're going to have a ton of fun and hopefully see the Dolphins get to 7-7.